Hey, what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we're going to be talking about the old 1988 movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So it is an old movie. It is on Disney Plus, but we are going into spoiler territory regardless. So if you haven't seen it and you maybe want to see it, then click away, go watch it, and then come back and see what we had to say about it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into this. Now, it goes out saying that at this point, this movie is a classic, right? Like, most people have heard of this film, even if they haven't seen the film. And it's really interesting to me because when this movie came out, when I was looking at it and you see how the film is so heavy in its noir themes, it really does feel like this movie might have come out in the 60s. But it didn't. It came out like right before the 90s. But it evokes that it evokes that feeling so well for the same films that it's emulating from that time, and that it like I feel like if you picked it out of time and put it next to those other movies, it would fit right in.
Yeah, I mean it has a lot of the basic elements of a noir. You have a private eye investigator, you have a femme fatale, and you have a murder mystery or some kind of mystery that needs to be solved. And I think there's even a MacGuffin, which I believe is the will,
Oh,
sort
there
of.
is. You're right. The will is a
Yeah.
MacGuffin. Wow.
So it's, yeah, and I don't know if you noticed, and I'm not 100% sure if it's a nod to the Maltese Falcon, but there is a falcon statue at some point, like early in the film, and every time I watch this movie, I'm like, is that the Maltese Falcon? It has to be. It has to
Oh, I don't.
be.
Yeah, I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, watch it again, or I could see if I can find the timestamp for you, so you can tell me if you think that's the Falcon or not. But it's not even a subtle thing. It's like takes up like the whole screen. It's just like there's other stuff going on
I
around it.
see.
But
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I wonder at the time when they made this movie, did they know that it was going to be a classic? And also, so when I first put it on, the first thing that stood out to me was how good the animation was. And I know, like, by that point, a couple of Disney movies had come out. I don't think Beauty and the Beast was out yet. I can't remember, but there was a couple of them. Like during this time, Disney released a bunch of movies where the animation quality on each of these movies just kept improving, and like this is one of those movies where, because I was comparing it to just like normal television animation or television cartoons that we were seeing at the time or around the same time, it like really stands out. And then on top of everything, I don't know if this is the first movie. I don't know if Howard the Duck came out before this. I think it did, but I feel like this is like the first movie that had humans and cartoon characters interacting on such a huge scale as they interact on in this movie. And watching this movie now and not being completely familiar with like with what technology they had at the time, because I don't think they really had access like I don't and maybe they had green screens, but I don't think they had computers the same way we do now. So I have to ask myself, how did they even make this movie?
Yeah, I honestly I don't know. I didn't really look into it too much, but the way they did it, it holds so well. Like even watching it now, like yeah, there's some shots where it's a little clunky and stuff, but they did a great job putting the two together, and they did it consistently. Where, like I mean, the two main characters, Roger and Eddie, are
Mm.
basically together almost the entire time. There's hardly ever like a shot where it's all cartoon or all real life.
Right.
It's just very well melded together and in a equal enough way where it doesn't feel like they're really trying to show off the technology. I never felt that they were trying to show off. I think they were, giving us establishing points where, to show us, like, look, the cartoon characters are in the world, same world as the humans. And they do it right off the bat with just starting off on the studio. And
Yeah.
I love the opening scene because it just goes right into a cartoon, and it's Roger Rabbit and the baby. And it's these two cartoon characters that I have never seen before because they are not part of any other cartoon. They are just original characters for this movie. Um, and then they like call cut, and all the crew is there, and all the crew are humans, and the actors in the set are the cartoon characters. And like, I love how he just keeps hitting himself on the head. He's like, I can make stars, I can make stars. But he keeps getting like other stuff. So I thought like all of that was great. It's just a perfect mesh. And then there's like the whole Dumbo scene with everything, like the box spilling outside and the
The
animated
hippo.
band thing coming out. Yeah. So all of that was like definitely to establish, like, look, hey, this is a world where we have cartoons and humans together, and the cartoons are actors, and the humans are like the filmmakers and stuff. Like, it's very separated. So it's separated but still together. So I thought that was very smooth the way they did that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that part where you find out that it's they're filming a television show, and it's like these cartoons are basically filmed the same way you would film like any other television show or a movie. And I love the fact that after working in film, now these like things like stick out to me when the director says call lunch, and then you hear the AD say that's lunch, and then he's like that's lunch one half, and I was like, oh my god, I actually know what these things mean now. So I was like, okay, I was like, that's kind of fun, like looking back on it that way. But one moment that I did feel like they were trying to show off with the technology, and I remember even like when I was watching it, I thought to myself, this is to show off what they are able to do, was the introduction of Jessica Rabbit when she comes out on stage. So like she's walking on stage and she's singing, but then she steps down. But she stepped down, she's helped down first off, and then she's like touching the napkin and like touching Marvin's head and like moving the napkin, and then she goes and she touches Valiant's tie and like pulls his tie and pulls him close and then pushes him away. And I was like, okay, this is one to show, like, give you an idea of who Jessica Rabbit is, the femme fatale. But on the other hand, I was like, this is to show like off the technology and the fact that she's actively interacting with the human world around her. But still, it works, and it looks good. But yeah, that was the only time I thought that they were trying to show off.
Yeah, and the great thing about that is it was still part of the story. Like, it was giving us not just showing off, but it
Mm-hmm.
was telling us, like, this is Jessica Rabbit. Like, she's supposed to be really sexy, and she's supposed to be, like, um, super hot. And, like, you're supposed to be like, wait, that's Roger Rabbit's wife? What? Because they're like complete opposites.
Right.
So it's doing all of that while showing off the technology, which is why I think that it's so much more subtle, and a way better approach than what we were talking about just before this, which was the Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers movie. So, um, yeah, I mean, do you want to talk about Jessica Rabbit? Because that's a lot to unpack there.
We'll get back to Jessica Rabbit. One of the things that I did want to bring up, that I because you mentioned it briefly about how like it mixes in the technology with the storytelling, so it exists for a reason. Like it's establishing character, but it's also showing off the technology, and that's why it feels subtle. And this this movie and this type of filmmaking, they find different ways to kind of show you who characters are. When we first meet Valiant and he comes in, you actually see him, looking at the alcohol, just briefly, like staring at it, and then that becomes a thing for the rest of the movie. But you find out, that he's an alcoholic. But then they do other things like when he gets on the bus, he can't afford to get on the bus. So what's he get on? He gets on the back with a bunch of kids. But then a kid is like running behind and can't get on. And what's he do? He actually picks up the kid and actually puts the kid on. So all of a sudden, okay, he's poor, but he also is like really kind. He's really kind to kids, which is cool. Also, brief note about that scene. The kids are actively smoking cigarettes and they are absolutely underage. And they even give him a cigarette. And that's one of those moments where I was just like, yep, this is not a PG movie by today's standards. This is PG-13, and I don't even know if you would show like 10 or 12-year-olds like actively like smoking cigarettes or at least pulling out cigarettes and pretending like insinuating that they smoke cigarettes. But they actually give him cigarettes and he thanks them for them, which is so funny.
See, I thought you were gonna talk about how he was saying that it's like the best transportation, like who needs a car when LA has the best public transportation. And then later on it's so funny that they like made a joke. I don't know if it was bad back then, but it definitely is now. But then they made another joke that or I don't even know if it was a joke, but basically the villain was talking about like getting rid of Toontown to make a freeway. And that would eliminate traffic jams.
I laughed so hard.
I was like, have you been to LA?
I think that was the joke. I get the feeling LA traffic has always been kind of bad.
Yeah. That's such a great joke because it's not even funny like in the movie. It's funny in real life that is the villain's plan.
Right, which is absolutely kind of great. And everything he describes in that scene, he's like billboards and food and places where you can get food that's quickly prepared and gas station, miles and miles. And you're just like, bro, you're basically describing modern society.
Yeah.
And he's just like, it'll be beautiful. And then meanwhile, Brian is just like, that's stupid. No one's going to do that when they can take the train. And the guy's like, that's why I bought the train. Oh my gosh, it's freaking great. But but they do a lot of things like this where they do visual storytelling, and that's one of those things that kind of is lost today, regardless of how effective you think it is handled in this movie. The fact is they actually attempt to show you things through the environment. So when he gets drunk and passes out, the camera pans up over to where his brother used to sit. And there's cobwebs and everything, which shows that, his brother's been dead for a long time and Valiant hasn't cleaned up. And then they pan over and they show the two of them that they were in the force together and they were called clowns, but then they also apparently were clowns as kids. They their dad was I guess was part of the circus and therefore they were too. And that actually never comes up in conversation. No one ever brings up the fact that, hey, when you were a kid, you were in the circus, right? But through the environment, through the pictures that he has in his house, which to me feels organic because people have pictures in the place that they live. You get all this extra information about who he is and who he was, and these are things that might not even come up in conversation later on in the movie. And I think that level of visual storytelling is something that I can appreciate.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, it's so hard because I feel like I was so involved or like so just captured or captivated by the story and just like everything that's happening. It's hard for me to like notice stuff like that because I'm just like absorbing all of it as it's just like going right through me because I'm just having a good time watching it. Because there's just so many like enjoyable things about the movie. I mean, I don't know. I think I was very distracted by Jessica Rabbit.
Okay, so it looks like it's about time for us to unpack Jessica Rabbit. We can get some other stuff. But yes, Tracy, you're right. Even on the door it says Valiant. So, yeah, absolutely cool. Like just more visual storytelling about them and being the detectives that they are. But what do you want to say about Jessica Rabbit?
I mean,
remember, she's not bad. She's just drawn.
I know, right? The famous line from this movie. I think
Mhm.
that's the famous line from this movie.
It is.
But it's I have mixed feelings because on the one hand, I always forget about how gross it is, like what they do with her. But because I was taking notes and stuff to like talk about this movie today and everything. I don't know if I can ever erase this from my mind now, but there's some really objectifying parts for Jessica Rabbit, which I hate because she is a super strong female character in this movie. Like, she can hold her own. She is not a damsel. Maybe just a little bit later, but like that's a little different.
But so was her
Um,
husband at that point.
yeah. But she was like taking the situation by the reins and like, you know, really getting, Eddie on track with, solving the case and everything. But then yeah, this whole thing like at the beginning, like I get like we're establishing how sexy she is and stuff, but we had a little bit too long maybe of a boob focus shot where like we can only really see her boobs and her curvy spots.
Hmm.
And then there was another instance where like Eddie bumps into her boobs when he's like standing up and like they like really yeah. So it hurts. It hurts to see that. I know it's like the late 80s and everything and like stuff like that was still okay.
And it was also, like you said, trying to be a femme fatale, and it was basically taking that to parody levels as far as like how they represented her.
I think it was a tad unnecessary. That was definitely for the men.
Hmm.
100%. Like, it doesn't add anything else to the story. It's just 100% objectifying the character. And so, like, I think that's probably literally the only thing that I don't like about the movie is just how they did that. But otherwise, I think they really, like I said earlier, they gave her a really good, strong female character. It's just that those little things they did there. But I do have to say, when she was walking down the stage,
Yeah.
and like we're just seeing her legs, and then all the guys like gawking at her. I don't know if you noticed, but you can kind of see through her dress to see their faces behind the dress. So check that out again.
Mm.
That I'm sure you wouldn't mind watching that scene again, but
It's a cartoon character. Don't do that. Or discredit.
I mean, there's a whole line of anime out there for her.
I mean, yes, you're right, but yeah, Jessica Rabbit is definitely drawn with vastly unrealistic proportions, like super narrow hips, huge ass boobs, and everything else. But I will say the one thing that I appreciated with Jessica Rabbit in this movie, which is something I did not remember as a kid, was so at the end when they get captured and one of the weasel and they have to like frisk everybody and the weasel's like, I'm gonna frisk the woman, and then he puts his hand down her shirt, and I literally when I was watching I was like, whoa, really, they're doing that? He just putting his hand down her shirt, and then like, the trap goes off and he pulls his hand out in pain, and the guy walks over, like valiantly's over and says, nice booby trap. It took me a whole like 3 seconds to get the joke, and the moment I got the joke, I burst out laughing, and I just felt like that was so good. And so for the purposes of being able to make that joke, I was like, okay, I can appreciate this moment now, because I didn't get it at first, and then 3 seconds later I was like, oh, I yes, absolutely great. So
I
no, but
100% was just like, oh my god. And then I was like, but that was a good joke too.
yeah.
Like, that's a really messed up, but that's also a really good joke.
It's so good. Just so like I was like I understand because it exists to set up the joke, so I'll deal with it. But yes, I agree. Like it is egregious with what they do with Jessica Rabbit. I mean, and they did the same thing with Lola Bunny in Space Jam, right? Um, it's a
Yeah.
different time.
Yeah.
Um,
There was also
so
this one part where, like, when Eddie and Dolores were in the bar, and then he ducks because I
and
think
he
Roger
pulls her shirt
he pulls
down
her
from the
down
middle.
right. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't with this time period. See, this is why we're rebooting everything, guys. No, I'm just kidding. But it is kind of crazy that films back then. It's not even that long ago when
Yeah, but
they were doing stuff
at
like
the same
this.
time, while those moments are annoying, at least at the same time, they didn't only make those characters objects, right? They did objectify those characters, but that's not their only purpose in the movie. Like, there's a lot of things that Valiant couldn't do without the woman in the bar. I forgot her name, Dolores.
Dolores.
Dolores. So, like, there's a lot of things he wouldn't have accomplished if Dolores wasn't helping him. So, and Dolores is also shown to be strong and independent, just like Jessica Rabbit. And so those are the two primary female characters. And there's that one moment where he pulls her shirt down, but outside of that, she's not. That character isn't objectified, but Jessica Rabbit is. But at least both those characters are also, like you said, they're not damsels, and they're also perfectly capable on their own. So, in one hand, you're like, okay, it's messed up what they were doing as far as objectifying those characters, but on the other hand, at least they didn't stop there, and they at least made those characters feel like characters. So it's not the worst interpretation or the worst way, but obviously it was like you guys are almost there, just a little further.
Yeah, but I think that's probably why, like, or one of the reasons why I think this movie is so great is because of exactly that. Like, the women are strong characters, and you don't even really give it a second thought. I'm never like, there's too many men in this movie. Like, I wish I could see a female because there
Even
are.
though it's mainly men in the movie.
Yeah, but it almost feels equal because there's two very predominant women that are in the movie a lot. So, and it's not, and they're not sidekicks either. They help drive the story. So I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. I think that also one thing that this movie did, which was, I guess, kind of similar to what Space Jam 2 was trying to do as well. So they said, we're going to take real people and tunes and mix them together in the real world. And then we're going to have a real person in an all tune world and see how that does. And so they do both in this movie to show you that they can. And I think that having the tunes in the real world works better than having a real person in the tune world. There are definitely parts that felt, when I was looking at it, it felt odd. Like, there's one part where I can actually see whatever the little highlights are around Bob Hoskins' body while he's in the tune world. But I never noticed that over the tunes or anything else like that. So it might just be easier back then to composite tunes into the real world than a live human into a tune world. But then also the Toon World, I always remember that scene where he's falling off the building and Bugs Bunny gives him a tire for the spare because it's a spare tire, and I just get so angry at Bugs because I'm just like, you're such a douchebag, dude. Like, oh my gosh. But I also was asking and found myself asking, what's the logistics of the Toon World? Because can humans die in the Toon World? Because if they can, then Bugs Bunny actively could have contributed to the death of this man, and also wouldn't more humans be dying in Toon World? Because what wouldn't kill a Toon would absolutely kill a human. So kind of like earlier with Rescue Rangers, the movie just asks you, don't think too hard about it, just enjoy yourself and have a good time.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is also the only logical question that I had when watching this movie, because they definitely say that there's no way you can kill a tune, and the only way that you can is with that um,
Dip.
the dip. Yeah. um, but yeah, but we do know that tunes can kill people. So
Right.
so that did worry me a little bit when I was like, why would any human being want to go to Toontown? It's
Yeah,
dangerous
it sounds
there.
It sounds awful, like you drop a piano on a tune, they walk away. You drop a piano on Mr. Acme's head, he don't get back up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think even Valiant's brother was killed by a piano being dropped on,
Piano.
which also, once again, that's visual storytelling, right? The way that his brother died and the way that Acme died was the same, and they don't actively say, "Hey, this person died the same way my brother died." But if you're paying attention, you can put it together, and therefore you can conclude that whoever killed Mr. Acme is probably the same person that killed Bob Hoskins, Valiant's brother. So, just little moments like that. Like it's great. It's really well put together. What can I say? I like it.
It makes Chris so giddy.
Yes, I love those details. I love details that don't get called out, but you can actively put together on your own. I think that's really good visual storytelling. So yeah, another one of scene that I got to bring up, or at least want to ask you, going back to that Jessica Rabbit scene, right before Jessica Rabbit came out on stage. Donald or Daffy? Who are you?
Ooh, Donald, 100%.
Oh, I'm Daffy. All right.
But now that you bring that up, I actually thought that it was so awesome for them to have had that scene where they had like the two star ducks of Warner's and Disney. And by the way, we're talking about this off off recording, but still during our Twitch show. That we were kind of wondering about like who has ownership over this movie and why they were able to have Disney characters and Warner characters. And I think I think the story is, if I was reading it correctly, I just did a brief research on it. Apparently, Disney bought the rights to the story, so technically they owned Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but it was partially distributed by Warner. So it seems like they were able to do some kind of collaboration. But I really liked it. I think that is the way to go. We didn't really get that from the Chippendale Rescue Rangers because that was all Disney. But here we have a real Toon world where it's not just one franchise or one company. It's both of the major ones. And then here you have a scene with Daffy versus Donald, and then you have Mickey and Bugs falling down, like they're like parachuting or skydiving together. And at the very end, you get the two characters that end both shows, which is Porky Pig and Tinkerbell. So I thought that was awesome.
I didn't even
like
put
they did
together
that.
that they were from separate franchises, or separate companies. You're right; they are the ones that end the shows. That's cool.
Yeah, so I thought that was a nice touch, and I'm glad that they were able to do that despite being two different companies.
Yeah, and now you mention it, it almost feels like in scenes like that, it was almost like an agreement that we'll have one character from each company on screen at the same time. So like, yeah, Daffy and Donald, Bugs and Mickey, and then yeah, Porky and Tinkerbell. That's really cool. I like also how it made it look like that's how uh, Porky Pig came up with his slogan, where he said, "Ooh, I kind of like that." So it's just funny because also the thing that I want to look back on with this movie is, are the characters that we're seeing, were they all created before the 40s? Because this movie takes place in like 47 or something like that. I can't remember. Sometime in the 40s is when this movie's supposed to take place. So I was like, they shouldn't have any characters technically that would have been created after the 40s. So I was really curious if the only characters that we saw within this movie were characters that had been created in the 40s, despite the fact this movie was created like late 80s.
I think that might be true because the next Disney film to be made is actually The Little Mermaid. So, and we didn't see any of that. And I'm not too sure about the Warner characters, but it seems like it's pretty in line with the. Because I didn't really see any Disney characters from the Golden Age, which is what we grew up with.
Right. So, yeah, so I like that. I like that a lot, and just in general, like we were just saying before, everything that the movie does with the tone and the time period, it all works. And Christopher Lloyd as the villain scarred me as a kid, actually. I remember, like, there's a lot of this movie I did not remember, but the one thing I did not forget was how Christopher Lloyd looked and his voice at the end of the movie when it's revealed that he's actually a Toon.
Oh my gosh.
Even when he got up after being smushed, I remember when I saw that as a kid, that bothered me because it looked scary to me. So, and now obviously I've seen a whole lot worse, so it doesn't have the same effect on me. But that stood out to me as a kid, which is why another reason it's like this movie. I feel like there's a lot of adult themes. There's like drinking. There's like sick children with cigarettes. You have Toons actively drinking. They're not underage, but it is cartoon characters drinking alcohol. Like there's scenes in bars. They actively murder that shoe in that one scene, and it is a murder because that shoe did nothing wrong, and they still put that shoe in the dip only to demonstrate that dip could kill Toons. But it doesn't make sense because of the fact that you only would kill a Toon if it did something wrong. So the fact that no one said anything is a travesty. It's probably one non-logistical scene in this movie.
That one scene really made me think, like, this is not for kids. It's definitely not for kids. I'm not sure if they tried to market it that way, but it is a noir too. So that's definitely not for kids. Because noirs are historically boring, in my opinion. But, but even with like the whole Jessica Rabbit stuff, and then, like you said, right? The drinking, there's a lot of violence in this film, so I don't feel like, I don't even know what it was rated.
PG.
Really? Well,
this movie is rated PG.
Back in the day.
Yeah, right? Different time.
I know. I think, there might not have been a rating for PG-13 yet.
I don't know. I think Gremlins came out in like the early 80s, and I know Gremlins was rated PG, and I feel like because of Gremlins, I think it was Gremlins specifically that might have made the ratings board like come up with the PG-13 rating, but still I think they might have been trying to figure it all out. But by today's standards, this movie would not be PG. It would be absolutely PG-13.
Yeah.
Without
not R.
question.
Definitely not R, but PG-13. Yeah. There really needed to be some kind of sweet spot in between PG and R, and that would be PG-13. So that's what I would rate this.
Especially with this movie. But we are running up on time. Well, did you have any other pressing things you wanted to say for our YouTube segment before we get out of here?
No, that's it for me.
So if you guys want to hear us talk a little bit more about this and other things, you can check us out on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/C3Films. It'd be great to see you guys over there. But what did you guys think about Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Have you seen it? Is it a modern classic? Is it a classic for you guys as well? Did you enjoy the technology? Do you know how they even did it? Do you appreciate it more than the movies that came out after it, like Space Jam or Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers? Whatever you thought about it, comment below. Let us know. And while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, and subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and we'll see you all next time.